Recession isn't coming, it's already here. Across America, cracks are forming beneath the surface from rising home foreclosures and record credit card debt to cities struggling to keep the lights on. Families are moving, jobs are vanishing, and entire state economies are showing signs of fatigue. But not every state will feel this pain equally. Some are standing right at the edge with aging industries, shrinking tax bases, and housing markets that are about to blow. Today, we're counting down the 8 states that could collapse first as the U.S. enters a recession, from the Rust Belt to the Sun Belt. And trust me, some of these names will surprise you. So, let's start the list and see which state might be the first to fall. Number 8, Ohio. Ohio used to be the beating heart of American industry, a land of steel, auto plants, and blue-collar pride. Cities like Cleveland, Toledo, and Youngstown were once booming hubs where a factory job could buy you a home, send your kids to college, and keep a family comfortable for decades. But fast forward to today, and that picture looks completely different. Ohio's industrial belt has rusted, and many of the towns that once built America's backbone are now fighting just to survive. Manufacturing jobs have been bleeding out for years. According to state data, Ohio has lost more than 350,000 manufacturing positions since the early 2000s. The rise of automation and cheap overseas production hit hard. The median household income in Ohio is still below the national average, and that gap keeps widening. A lot of Ohioans live paycheck to paycheck, watching inflation eat away at their savings. Let's talk housing. It's not California-level crazy, but the problem in Ohio is the opposite. Home values are too low in many small towns, making it impossible for owners to build equity. In cities like Cleveland, more than 1 in 5 homes sit vacant in certain neighborhoods. That means less property tax revenue, which leads to fewer city services, which pushes even more people out, a cycle that just keeps spinning. At the same time, the population is aging fast. Ohio ranks among the top 10 states with the highest percentage of residents over 65. When you mix that with outmigration of young workers to states like Florida, Texas, and the Carolinas, you get a shrinking tax base and ballooning pension liabilities. And then there's municipal debt, the silent killer. A lot of Ohio's small and mid-sized cities have been borrowing heavily to cover budget gaps or maintain aging infrastructure. Roads, bridges, water systems. Most of them were built in the 1950s and 60s. Maintenance costs are skyrocketing, and with tax revenues falling, the math just doesn't add up. If a deep recession hits, cities like Toledo or Canton could be pushed right to the edge of default. Another big concern is healthcare. Rural hospitals across Ohio are shutting down because they can't afford to stay open. When that happens, it doesn't just mean longer drives for patients, it also means job losses and less local spending. And that hurts small-town economies that are already on life support. Let's not forget education. Many local school districts are underfunded, forcing cuts in teachers and programs. Parents who can afford it move their kids to better districts, often across state lines. And every time a family leaves, that community loses another taxpayer, another consumer, another bit of hope. Meanwhile, the state government in Columbus is trying to keep the ship afloat, but it's not easy. Ohio's rainy day fund is decent, but it won't cover a full-blown recession. The state's dependency on manufacturing, agriculture, and logistics makes it especially sensitive to global trade slowdowns. If exports drop or supply chains seize up again, it's going to hit Ohio harder than most. So, when we talk about states most likely to collapse first as America slides deeper into recession, Ohio makes the list not because it's weak, but because it's been bleeding for too long. Its economy was built for a different century, and time is catching up fast. The question now isn't whether Ohio can recover. It's whether it can reinvent itself before the next wave of economic pain hits. Number 7, Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania. Once the powerhouse of America's Industrial Revolution, the state that fueled the nation with steel, coal, and hard work. From the steel mills of Pittsburgh to the coal mines of Scranton, this was where America built its strength. But today, the story is shifting. and not in a good way. The same industries that made Pennsylvania rich are now dragging it down. Let's start with the obvious, the coal collapse. For over a century, coal was king here. Towns in the Appalachian region thrived on mining, and generations of families made their living deep underground. But as America pushes toward cleaner energy, coal jobs have vanished. Thousands of miners have been laid off, and those small mining towns, places like Johnstown, Shamokin, and Hazleton, are fighting just to keep the lights on. Now, you might think the shift to natural gas would have saved the day. After all, Pennsylvania sits on top of the massive Marcellus Shale Formation, one of the largest natural gas reserves in the world. And yeah, for a while it looked like the gas boom would bring back prosperity. But it didn't. Most of the profits went to large corporations and investors, not local communities. Towns that once hoped to rebuild off that boom are now left dealing with environmental costs, road damage, and no long-term jobs to show for it. Let's talk infrastructure for a minute, because Pennsylvania's is falling apart. The American Society of Civil Engineers gave the state's infrastructure a C- grade. Bridges, highways, water systems, they're all aging fast. Drive through any part of rural Pennsylvania, and you'll see crumbling roads and small towns that look stuck in the 1980s. The state has more structurally deficient bridges than almost anywhere else in the country, and when local governments can't afford repairs, it's not just an inconvenience, it's a safety hazard. Then there's the job market. While Philadelphia and Pittsburgh have tried to transition into service, healthcare, and education hubs, much of the state hasn't kept up. Many counties in central and northern Pennsylvania have unemployment rates nearly double the national average, and that migration hurts twice. It drains local economies of talent and taxpayers, and it leaves behind an older, poor population that needs more public services that are already underfunded. The housing market in Pennsylvania is another quiet warning sign. It's not as volatile as states like Arizona or California, but that's part of the danger, because it's stagnating. In many small towns, home prices haven't risen in 20 years. That means no equity growth, no wealth creation for families. Let's zoom in on Philadelphia for a second. It's Pennsylvania's biggest city, full of culture, history, and potential. But it's also burdened by poverty and crime. Over a quarter of Philly's residents live below the poverty line. That's nearly double the national average. And when you mix that with underfunded schools, rising rents, and crime spikes, it's not hard to see why people are leaving. Pittsburgh's doing better, sort of. It's reinvented itself as a tech and healthcare city, with companies like Google and UPMC leading the way. A recession would hit Pennsylvania like a storm. Less tax revenue from shrinking incomes, more people needing unemployment and social assistance, and higher borrowing costs. That combination could push multiple counties toward insolvency. We're talking about real risks. Counties that can't pay employees, schools cutting weeks off the calendar, police and fire departments slashing shifts. If you want to see the future Pennsylvania is trying to avoid, look at places like Scranton, a once thriving industrial town that's now struggling with debt, population loss, and aging infrastructure. The city has filed for bankruptcy-level distress before, and if the economy keeps sliding, it won't be the last. Still, not everything's hopeless. Pennsylvania has one thing going for it: grit. The same determination that built America's railroads and factories is still alive in its people. So as America slides deeper into economic uncertainty, Pennsylvania stands on the edge, not because it's weak, but because it's worn down. Number 6, Michigan. When you think of Michigan, one image comes to mind: the heartbeat of American manufacturing. The home of Ford, GM, and Chrysler. The place that once put the world on wheels, but the same engine that powered America's economy for generations is now sputtering, and Michigan's feeling every jolt of it. Let's be real. Michigan's story is America's story. Once booming factories, busy neighborhoods, and proud workers. Then came automation, outsourcing, and economic storms that never truly passed. Detroit became the face of that collapse, a city that went from one of the richest in the country to the first major city to file for bankruptcy. And while Detroit's been rebuilding its image, the deeper cracks haven't gone away. The auto industry still defines Michigan's fate. Nearly 1 in 5 jobs here is tied directly or indirectly to car manufacturing. So when production slows, the entire state feels it. Earlier this year, several auto plants announced layoffs due to decreased demand and rising costs. Thousands of skilled workers suddenly found themselves out of work, again. And in small towns like Flint, Saginaw, and Pontiac, every job lost hits like a gut punch. Because it's not just one paycheck disappearing. It's a local diner losing customers, a school losing funding, and a neighborhood losing hope. And then there's the housing problem. Michigan's housing market has always been complicated. In cities like Detroit and Flint, you can still find homes selling for under $30,000. Sounds great, right? But most of those homes are in neighborhoods with declining populations, high crime, and little opportunity. And let's not forget Michigan's pension crisis. Between city, county, and state obligations, Michigan owes billions to retirees. That money has to come from somewhere. And as tax revenues decline, the pressure builds. Detroit, despite its comeback headlines, still faces deep inequality. Downtown looks great. New arenas, restaurants, and condos. But just drive a few miles out and the story changes. Abandoned homes, boarded up schools, and blocks where no one's lived for years. The recovery hasn't reached everyone, and a lot of Detroiters feel left behind. Outside the big cities, rural Michigan is fading even faster. Small manufacturing towns that once supplied parts for auto giants now have shuttered plants and empty main streets. Farmers are dealing with droughts, rising fuel costs, and unpredictable markets. Tourism, especially around the Great Lakes, helps during summer, but it's seasonal. Come winter, jobs dry up. So what happens if a full-blown recession hits? Michigan could face a double blow. A national downturn would likely cut consumer demand for cars. The very thing Michigan depends on most. That means more layoffs, lower state revenue, and higher unemployment. Add to that inflation, rising interest rates, and declining investment, and you've got a storm brewing. Experts warn that if auto demand falls just 15%, Michigan's economy could shrink twice as fast as the national average. Think about that, twice the impact. It's a reminder of how fragile this recovery really is. But here's the thing. Michigan's people are resilient. They've rebuilt before, and they'll do it again. Cities like Grand Rapids and Ann Arbor are becoming small hubs for innovation, tech startups, clean energy, and education. The state's universities, especially the University of Michigan and Michigan State, are trying to drive the shift toward high-tech and research-based industries. Let's be honest, Michigan's biggest challenge isn't just economics, it's confidence. People here have seen too many false dawns, too many revivals that never reached their neighborhoods. The trust between the people and policymakers is thin, and rebuilding that is just as important as rebuilding factories. Number 5, Arizona. Arizona has always been painted as the land of opportunity. Endless sunshine, wide open skies, booming suburbs, and a promise that anyone could start fresh here. But behind that golden glow, the cracks are starting to show. What was once America's fastest growing state is now standing on the edge of something far more fragile, an economy built on borrowed time and borrowed water. For years, Arizona's growth looked unstoppable. People from California, Washington, and Illinois packed up their lives and moved to cities like Phoenix, Tucson, and Mesa, chasing cheaper homes and lower taxes. But here's the truth. Arizona's boom was built on a bubble. Housing prices exploded during the pandemic. What used to be a $250,000 home in Phoenix quickly jumped to over $500,000. Rent doubled in just a few years. Wages, though, barely moved. Thousands of working families found themselves priced out of the same dream that brought them here. Phoenix, which was once one of America's hottest real estate markets, is now showing the first signs of cooling. Inventory is rising, but buyers are disappearing. People who moved here for affordable living are realizing that groceries, gas, and utilities cost nearly as much as they did in California. just without the ocean view. And it's not just about the housing market. Arizona's economy has become dangerously dependent on growth itself. Construction, real estate, and tourism make up a massive part of its GDP. Add inflation, and the picture gets worse. Everyday essentials, water, electricity, and food, are more expensive than ever. Families who once stretched a dollar can't make it past the middle of the month. Arizona used to be a place where you could live comfortably on an average paycheck. Now, even dual-income households are struggling to keep up. But there's one issue that's bigger than all of this: water. You can't talk about Arizona's future without talking about the Colorado River. For decades, the state has relied on it to support millions of residents, endless golf courses, and countless new subdivisions in the middle of the desert. But that river is drying up, literally. The once mighty Colorado is now at its lowest levels in recorded history. Federal restrictions have already forced Arizona to cut its water usage, and more cuts are on the way. Imagine that. A housing boom in a state where new neighborhoods can't even get water rights. That's not just bad planning. That's a time bomb. On top of that, climate change is hitting Arizona harder than almost anywhere else. Summers are brutal. 115 degrees is becoming normal. Power grids are under strain. Wildfires are spreading faster. And heat-related deaths are climbing every year. When it's too hot to work outside and too expensive to cool your home, people start rethinking why they're there in the first place. Some are already leaving. Migration trends show that while Arizona is still gaining residents, the net inflow is slowing dramatically. The very states Arizona attracted, like California and Washington, are now seeing fewer people move out, while Arizona's own cost of living keeps climbing. It's not as cheap as it used to be, and the promise of affordable paradise is fading. And let's not forget the business side. The state's job market looks strong on paper, but a lot of that strength comes from service and construction jobs. Industries that are the first to crash when the economy dips. Tech companies that expanded into Phoenix during the pandemic are now freezing hires or cutting back. Intel delayed part of its expansion, and several startups have downsized or shut down entirely. If a full-blown recession hits, Arizona could get hit on three fronts: housing collapse, job losses, and environmental strain. That combination could turn the state's rapid growth into a rapid decline. Even the state government is bracing for it. Budget analysts have warned of shortfalls ahead due to slower tax collection and higher spending demands. Pension liabilities are creeping up again, and infrastructure, especially roads and utilities, is stretched to its limit. The scary part? Most of Arizona's smaller towns aren't prepared. Cities like Kingman, Casa Grande, and Yuma depend heavily on state aid and tourism. If those dry up, local economies could collapse almost overnight. So, where does Arizona go from here? The answer depends on whether it can shift from a growth-dependent economy to a sustainable one. The state has potential: solar energy, tech manufacturing, and logistics. But those sectors are still small compared to the old growth machine. Number 4, Georgia. Georgia has always been called the heart of the South, a land where Southern charm meets modern ambition. From the shining skyscrapers of Atlanta to the quiet farmlands that stretch across the countryside, Georgia tells two very different stories. On paper, Georgia looks strong, but outside that glittering skyline, the story changes. Drive a few hours south or west of Atlanta, and you'll see a different Georgia: empty storefronts, crumbling schools, and towns that haven't seen real growth in decades. The population is shrinking, the jobs are disappearing, and the tax base is drying up. It's a split economy, one that's creating winners and losers in the same state. Atlanta is booming like never before. The city's skyline keeps climbing. The airport is one of the busiest in the world, and its suburbs are expanding faster than the roads can handle. But this success comes at a price. Housing costs in the Atlanta metro have exploded. What used to be a $1,200 rent apartment is now $2,000 or more. Home prices have jumped nearly 50% since 2020, while wages for most workers have barely moved. Traffic is worse than ever, and infrastructure can't keep up. The same freeways that were built decades ago are now jammed day and night. The city's rapid expansion has put enormous strain on everything, from public schools to power grids to water systems. And as Atlanta grows wealthier, rural Georgia is fading away. The gap between metro Atlanta and the rest of Georgia isn't just economic, it's cultural and political too. You can feel the divide. Urban and suburban areas vote blue, pushing for progressive policies and growth, while rural Georgia stays deep red, rooted in tradition and struggling to be heard. Now add a recession to that mix, and the cracks will widen fast. If the U.S. economy slows further, Georgia's fragile balance could break. The state's dependence on logistics, warehousing, and consumer spending makes it especially vulnerable. Companies like UPS, Delta Airlines, and Home Depot, all Georgia-based giants, are already signaling slower growth ahead. And when those companies slow down, so does the entire state. The film industry, one of Georgia's biggest success stories in recent years, is also uncertain. Hollywood strikes, streaming cutbacks, and higher production costs have already forced studios to scale back. Atlanta's Hollywood of the South might soon feel the same chill that hit Los Angeles. So why is Georgia so vulnerable? Because its growth isn't balanced. It's like a tree that's grown tall but not deep. Atlanta's success makes the headlines, but its roots, the small towns, the rural counties, the blue-collar workers, are weak and drying out. When a storm comes, that kind of tree doesn't bend. It breaks. If the next recession hits, Georgia might not collapse all at once, but it'll fracture. The metro areas will tighten belts, cut spending, and maybe ride it out. But for the rest of the state, it could be devastating. Another decade lost, another wave of youth leaving, another round of small towns erased from the map. Number 3, Texas, the Lone Star State, land of wide open spaces, booming cities, and big dreams. But behind the skyscrapers of Austin, Dallas, and Houston, a storm is quietly gathering. A perfect storm fueled by debt, speculation, and overconfidence. While the headlines boast about population growth and tech expansion, the reality is far more fragile. The state's economy has long relied on 2 pillars: energy and real estate. And right now, both are showing cracks that could shake the foundation of Texas like never before. The first warning sign comes from housing. Over the last decade, Texas cities have experienced one of the fastest real estate booms in the country. Austin, in particular, became a magnet for tech professionals, with median home prices skyrocketing past $520,000, nearly double the national average. Dallas and Houston aren't far behind, with median prices at $460,000 and $430,000, respectively. But income growth hasn't kept pace. The median household income in Texas is around $74,000, meaning average families now spend over 45% of take-home pay just to cover mortgage obligations at current rates. This housing bubble isn't just a number on a graph. It's a ticking time bomb for communities. Developers overbuilt during the post-pandemic expansion, betting on endless migration and cheap credit. Energy, the lifeblood of Texas, isn't providing the safety net it once did. Oil and gas accounted for over 9% of state GDP in 2024, with Texas producing more crude than any other state. Texas's dependency on energy is compounded by municipal debt. Cities like Houston, Dallas, and Austin expanded rapidly during boom years, funding infrastructure, transit projects, and public amenities with borrowed money, expecting continuous growth. Now, with revenue slowing, these debts become an anchor rather than a lever for expansion. Employment trends add another layer of concern. While Texas has gained a reputation as a tech hub, with Austin often dubbed Silicon Hills, the sector is not immune to national slowdowns. Tech layoffs at major firms are becoming more frequent, and startups, long considered a source of innovation and jobs, are struggling to secure funding in a cautious investment environment. Migration, once a lifeline for Texas's growth, may soon act as a pressure point. In-migration from high-cost states like California and New York has boosted housing demand and fueled construction jobs. But this trend also brings higher living costs, inflating prices faster than wages. The state budget paints a stark picture. Texas' Rainy Day Fund, often cited as one of the strongest in the nation, is being tapped to cover shortfalls caused by energy volatility and declining property tax collections. Pensions for public employees are underfunded, and projections suggest gaps could widen if unemployment continues to rise. Number 2. Washington. Washington State, home to towering evergreens, booming tech giants, and one of the nation's priciest housing markets. But beneath the glass and steel skyline of Seattle, cracks are forming and they're widening fast. The headlines tell part of the story. Amazon, Microsoft, and other tech titans have slashed thousands of jobs in 2024 and 2025. These aren't small layoffs. Tens of thousands of highly paid workers, engineers, managers, support staff, suddenly find themselves without paychecks. When tech employees leave, the impact ripples outward. Restaurants lose customers, gyms empty, and local shops struggle to survive. A city that thrived on high-income workers is suddenly facing a vacuum. Housing has become an even harsher reality. Median home prices in Seattle and Bellevue remain near $850,000, while median household incomes hover around $110,000. The population shift is alarming. With affordability declining, young professionals and families are fleeing to lower-cost states like Oregon, Idaho, and even Texas. Municipal debt adds another layer of fragility. Seattle and King County have racked up billions in obligations, including pensions for public employees that are underfunded by tens of billions. Even outside Seattle, the state's economy isn't insulated. Smaller towns dependent on Boeing and other manufacturing hubs are already feeling layoffs and reduced contracts. Washington's agricultural regions are dealing with climate pressures, droughts, and water scarcity, affecting crop yields and farm income. Healthcare, another essential sector, is also showing strain. Hospitals in the Puget Sound region report rising debt, with rural hospitals at risk of closure if funding drops or demand decreases. Washington's dependence on tech and exports makes it especially vulnerable to global economic shifts. If overseas demand falters or if tech growth slows further, the state could see cascading effects, layoffs leading to reduced consumer spending, which then impacts retail, real estate, and services. Pension systems loom like ticking time bombs. The Washington State Public Employees Retirement System carries unfunded liabilities exceeding $50 billion. Transportation and infrastructure funding is another concern. Light rail expansion projects, highway repairs, and bridge maintenance rely heavily on tax revenue and federal grants. As population growth slows and revenues decline, projects may be delayed or canceled, creating bottlenecks that impact commerce and daily life. Even tourism, often overlooked, is feeling the squeeze. Seattle's convention centers report lower bookings, while iconic attractions like Pike Place Market and Space Needle see fewer international visitors due to weaker global travel trends and higher U.S. costs. Income inequality in Washington is reaching extremes. Tech millionaires and billionaires continue to thrive, but the middle class is being squeezed from all sides. High housing costs, rising food prices, and stagnant wages outside the tech sector. Let's not forget climate risks. Washington has faced increasingly volatile weather. Wildfires, floods, and severe storms have damaged infrastructure and homes. Education systems face fiscal stress too. With reduced enrollment from outmigration and shrinking local revenues, schools may struggle to pay teachers, maintain facilities, and fund essential programs. So, what does this mean for Washington? In simple terms, a high-cost, tech-reliant state is entering recession with multiple vulnerabilities. Housing is unaffordable, municipal debt is high, pensions are underfunded, and migration is eroding tax revenue. The combination of these factors creates a perfect storm, and Washington could be one of the first major states to feel the full force of a severe economic downturn. Number 1, New York. New York, the Empire State, home to Wall Street, Broadway, and millions of dreamers chasing the American ideal. But behind the iconic skyline of Manhattan, the city and state are facing an economic storm that could redefine the meaning of crisis in America. Skyrocketing living costs have pushed New Yorkers to the edge. Median home prices in New York City exceed $900,000, while rents are equally staggering. A one-bedroom apartment in Manhattan can easily top $3,000 per month. Outside the city, suburban areas like Long Island and Westchester are not immune, with families feeling the squeeze of high property taxes and living expenses. Even middle-class households are struggling to maintain their standard of living. The job market tells a similar story. Wall Street layoffs have already begun, with financial firms trimming thousands of positions in anticipation of recessionary pressures. Small businesses, the backbone of New York's economy, are closing at alarming rates. New York's state budget is under immense pressure. Projections estimate a shortfall exceeding $50 billion, with unfunded pension liabilities adding billions more to the debt. This financial tightrope is unprecedented in scale, and mistakes could trigger a cascade of municipal crises. Migration patterns add another layer of concern. Residents are leaving New York in record numbers, seeking lower costs in Florida, Texas, and other states with no income tax. The tax base is eroding just as demands on public services increase. Housing is not just unaffordable, it's unstable. Foreclosure rates, while not at peak levels yet, are creeping upward as homeowners struggle with mortgages and property taxes. The economic imbalance in New York is extreme. Manhattan and parts of Brooklyn remain prosperous, fueled by finance, tech, and high-end service industries. But outer boroughs, upstate cities, and small towns face stagnation, with limited job growth and declining real estate values. Infrastructure challenges compound the crisis. Bridges, tunnels, and subway systems require billions in investment. Roads and public transit outside New York City are also aging and underfunded. Climate and disaster risks are another critical factor. Rising sea levels threaten lower Manhattan and parts of Long Island. New York's financial exposure is particularly acute. Wall Street firms, banks, and hedge funds dominate the city's economic ecosystem. The human element cannot be ignored. Millions of New Yorkers have adapted to high costs through dual-income households, long commutes, and tight budgets. But recessionary pressures test these adaptations. Job losses, high rents, and inflation create stress on families, affecting health, education, and community stability. The ripple effects of economic strain will touch every facet of daily life. Even the cultural fabric is at stake. Neighborhoods that once attracted artists, entrepreneurs, and young professionals may no longer be affordable. Looking ahead, the risk is clear. New York is highly exposed to a perfect storm of high debt, high costs, and financial market dependence. Without intervention, the state could face cascading effects: rising foreclosures, municipal budget crises, business closures, and population outflow that echo the urban decline seen in other American cities decades ago. The question is stark: can New York stabilize and adapt, or will it be a cautionary tale of economic vulnerability on a massive scale? The coming months will test the resilience of the Empire State, its institutions, and its people. In conclusion, New York embodies the challenges of America's next recession. Skyrocketing costs, financial exposure, high debt, and population shifts make it one of the most vulnerable states in the nation. For residents, businesses, and policymakers, the task is clear: adapt fast, diversify the economy, and protect the communities that have long made New York a beacon of opportunity. Otherwise, the Empire State may find itself facing a crisis unlike any seen before in its storied history. America's next recession won't hit evenly. It will strike hardest where systems were already cracking. From Ohio's struggling industrial towns to New York's soaring debt and sky-high living costs, these states are standing at the edge of an economic storm that could reshape communities for years. Families will be forced to make tough choices. Businesses will close or downsize, Jobs will vanish, and the migration patterns we're seeing today, people leaving high cost, high debt states for cheaper alternatives, will only accelerate. The consequences are real, and the time to understand them is now. But this isn't just doom and gloom. Awareness is power. Knowing which states are vulnerable helps residents, investors, and policymakers prepare and adapt. The next American recession is a test for economies, communities, and the people who live in them. If you found this video eye-opening, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Living Wise Global. Your engagement helps us continue to bring you the facts, insights, and stories that matter most before it's too late.